Welcome to another video in the series of my viewer-submitted patch edits or tone edits for the Line 6 Helix. This week we're dealing with a patch that was submitted to me by Alexander Belleville. He's a frequent user on the Line 6 Helix group, Chad Boston's group. He's one of my viewers on YouTube. Very nice fella, and he submitted this tone to me asking if I could just sort of take a look at it and see what my thoughts were on it. His one description was that he plays a lot of Iron Maiden type stuff. That's kind of the tone he was going for. So that's a pretty broad description, but it also does get you, give you an idea of what he's looking for. He also mentioned he's using some custom IRs of his own, which he included, and I loaded up in here. So this is kind of interesting. It's the first one that I've done with IRs instead of stock cabs, which is fine. Obviously, we lose the ability to, move around the microphones or change the microphones out, which I've done in some of the previous patches, but that's fine. I mean, I don't want to mess with everybody's sound that much. If somebody has found an IR that they like that much, then I'm going to say, hey, go for it. That's something they should continue to use. So unless I heard something really awful happening with it, maybe I would have swapped it out for stock cabs, but these were perfectly great IRs. That Alexander used. So my initial impressions were what he's using is a Cali 4 lead for both his rhythm and lead snapshots. And that's all he had here. So this is a pretty easy one. He had a rhythm and a lead. Basically, I believe, if memory serves me correct, both with the same settings, except for an extra delay kicked in on the lead channel, I believe. Yeah. So my first impressions of Alexander's patch was that it was really, really good. And this has been the last few of these I've done. The patches come in and are completely usable, which it puts me in a bit of a funny situation because I go, well, do I just send it back and say, hey, here you go, it's fine. But usually what happens is when I play it for a few minutes, I can start to hear sort of little things that maybe I would change. And again, the standard disclaimer, by no means do I think that the changes I make are the only way that this can be done. These are just my opinion on how I would react to this particular situation, given the description that in this case, Alexander gave me for what he was looking for. So again, this could go either way, and Alexander could get them and say, I can't stand them. He actually really, really liked them. I just did this one yesterday. Thought I would shoot the video right away while this was all fresh in my mind. He got back to me and he really liked what I did. And his description was really interesting because he described the change. I didn't tell him what changes I made. I usually save that for the video. But he described the outcome as being exactly what I was trying to fix, which was awesome. So let's dive into it. So Alexander wanted this like Iron Maiden type of a sound. And like I said, man, it was really good. Here was his original rhythm sound that he did. So my first impressions on that were, like I said, it was quite good. I enjoyed it. Now, the only thing I would change on that, two things. It sounded just a little bit thin and slightly harsh. And again, this is not dramatic stuff, but now, I can tell Alexander wants a nice sustaining sound there, and I didn't want to destroy that. But the other thing I found was that it was maybe just a little too saturated, a little too much gain for my personal preference. And again, when we're playing live or even recording, the oversaturated sounds are going to tend to get lost in the mix a little bit, right? We lose that pick attack. It almost acts like a poorly set compressor, right? It squashes that pick attack back, kind of mushes the sound a little bit so that it's not going to cut through as much. And it's kind of funny because a lot of people want their sound to cut more so they add more gain. And in a lot of cases, it's finding that sweet spot where there's enough gain to get the singing sustain and the power we want, but without starting to mush the sound. And this I found was just a little bit too much for my personal liking. So one thing I did is I dialed that back and I tried to just fatten the tone up a bit, okay? So the changes I made, very, very simple. On this here, on on my edit here on the rhythm, on the amp, Alexander had his lead gain at 8.7. I brought that back to 7.5. He had his lead drive at 7.9. I moved it to 8. And again, that might have just been me not moving it back to where it should have been. That's going to be a very mild difference. But so I brought the gain back just a little bit there. I brought his master back from 8 to 7, which was again going to be part of bringing that gain back a little bit. He had a distortion block, but just set to 0, more as a tone control with the tube screen, which is fine. I didn't even touch that. That was perfectly fine. I upped his bass from 1.3 to 2. I upped his mids from 5.9 to 7.7 to warm it up a little bit. And I brought his treble back 6.9 down to 6.1. So subtle changes. I also went down to the parametric EQ portion of this amp, since it is the Mesa Mark IV. And at 80 hertz, he had that minus 4.2, and I brought that up so it's minus 1.6. Add a little more beef to that bottom end. Even though that's pretty low down, it still gave a nice tweak to the sound, just fattened it up a little bit. What else? That was it on that. So that was all the changes I made to the amp. Very subtle, very small. His EQ block at the end, I changed subtly. I took 2200 hertz and he had it set at plus 1.2 and I brought it up to 2. And he had 6600 hertz set at plus 1.4 and I brought that up to plus 2. Again, very subtle. I was just trying to balance things, get a little more beef in the bottom end, take some of the harshness out, but still have some brilliance for it to cut. So it was a bit of a juggling act there to get that to work. So here is Alexander's original sound. And here's a change I made to it. So if you notice, it took away the shrillness, the maybe the annoying high end, warmed it up, fattened it up a little bit. And I think when I did this, I kind of listened real quick to... just to kind of compare, and again, not to try to match it, but just to get that bottom end dialed in, the warmth dialed in. It's not a harsh tone, you know? So Alexander was very, very happy with that. Basically for his lead, the only difference he had that I could tell is that, oh, I'm sorry, there is one other change. On the end block, that sort of mastering area of the compression that I've talked about so much in my other videos that Alexander's using here. Again, I don't know if he got that from me or if that's something he already did. But either way, he had a nice setting there. All I did is I tweaked the mix back. He had it at 100% and I brought it back to 80%. Just maybe to let the pick attack breathe through slightly more. The parallel compression technique. So again, that's subtle, very subtle. I mean, if you kept that at 100, it's not going to make a huge, huge difference. This is the third video I've shot today, so I'm just going to get through it with a little bit of coffee. All right, so as far as the lead channel goes, I don't remember there being really any difference in the amp settings. No, there wasn't. What he did do, though, is he had, on his rhythm sound, he had a subtle delay. Set to dotted eighth note, 16% feedback in the mix way back, just to, you know, and he had a nice reverb, fairly heavy reverb, but it actually worked. I didn't really touch it. He had a chamber reverb there, 6.6 decay, 100 millisecond pre-delay. I didn't touch that. I was fine. Perfectly happy with that. But on the lead, he did bring in a second delay. Now, on his original patch, if you go to his, let me just go back and get this so it's going to switch over where I want it to. So on Alexander's original, there's two common problems I'm noticing with a lot of the patches that get submitted to me. Is that number one, the compression settings are oftentimes too heavy-handed, too much compression, too squashed, right? And once you know how to dial in a compressor, that's easy to fix. And it can really take a tone that otherwise seems really almost unusable, and a couple little changes on the compressor, and boom, it comes to life, right? That's not a problem here. Like I said, I made a subtle change to Alexander's compression, but that's not going to be a real deal breaker either way. The other problem I see a lot is the overuse of delay, right? And that's a funny thing, and we're all guilty of it, myself included. I'm better at it now in recent years, but when I was younger, I was very much into loading the delay up, and it can become a bit of a crutch to our playing, right? We look for something to kind of get the notes to run together a little bit more, and and I'm not saying this in Alexander's case by any means, or to anybody specifically, but I have seen it even through all the years I was teaching guitar. Everybody just liked to crank that delay up. It just made life easier for them as a player. The problem is our sound, like I mentioned in a previous video, I can't remember which one it was, but we lose definition in our playing. Reverb and delays are going to have a way of pulling our sound back in the mix. And that's a good thing sometimes if that's what we're trying for. But if we want something like a lead which it's going to cut, a little bit of delay goes a long way. And it can be a little bit addictive to keep kind of turning that mix control up. So Alexander's delay settings were fine. He had a 492 millisecond delay. One thing I do on delay, and again, this is just my personal preference, I talked about it in one of my delay videos, is I tend to set that to a note value and then use my tap tempo for whatever song I'm playing, and I'll tap it to that so that the delays are always in time. And that kind of gives the impression sometimes that delays aren't as noticeable, but still kind of fill out our sound just because they're in time with other elements of the song, quite possibly, right? But again, that's neither here nor there. This is perfectly fine if Alexander wants the 492 millisecond setting. He had feedback of 28%, no problem. This is a mod chorus echo. He had a low cut and a high cut. And his modulation settings. I didn't touch any of that because there's nothing wrong with the way the delay sounded. I just found there was too much of it. So here was what Alexander sent me. To me, that's a lot of delay for my taste. Again, and then, it's as simple as Alexander wants more delay, he just roll that mix control back up, right? It's no problem. What I brought that down to is this here. I simply took his mix control from 31% down to 19%. If you notice that when I played some of the faster picking, there's more definition to the notes I was picking. You could hear kind of the pick attack. Whereas in the other one with the more delay, it starts to build up. Now, it might make it easier to play that type of thing, but I don't think it helps it to cut anymore in a mix. So anyways, that's just another thing. So really, other than the changes I already talked about, on the lead channel, or the lead snapshot, sorry, all I did is bring the mix of the delay back a bit. right, so that's a really fun tone. I really like that. That's a great metal sound as far as I'm concerned, in my personal opinion. So really not a whole lot to do on that. Alexander had an amazingly wonderful patch, really nice IRs. Everything was great to deal with here, and again, Alexander's just a really great guy to deal with. Really nice fella, and I'm just having so much fun talking with everybody and enjoying everybody's virtual company, right? And again, a real testament to our whole Line 6 group. I say our, I'm a part of it, not mine. But it's a really amazing group, and I'm happy to be a small part of it over there. So. Hope you guys like that, and in the end, like I mentioned, Alexander was happy with the tone, so I was happy with being able to help him out with that, and I hope it continues to work for him. So please like the video and share it, guys. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't. I really appreciate all the support, as always. Thank you for the kind comments, and if you have any questions about any of these, please leave them in the comments below. I always really try to get to them and answer them as best I can. All right, until next time, I hope you guys are all doing well, and we will talk soon.